So the Washington primary dawns, Keith, on this day, on what is an important day for Donald Trump, just as Bob Woodward, the famed Washington Post reporter, writes in the paper an exclusive piece about how Donald Trump would pay for the wall between Mexico and the United States. That's, of course, a cornerstone part of his campaign. Now, you drew this article to my attention, so explain what he's saying in it and explain how it fits in to the context of today.
Well, I think, Heather, there are a number of things that are important about it. First of all, the fact that it happened at all, I think, shows an understanding on Trump's part that people need details. They need to know more about the things that he is saying he will be able to do as president. And of course, the centerpiece of all of that has been building a wall between the United States and Mexico and having Mexico pay for it. He's been ridiculed on the campaign trail for that. People saying that's absurd. Mexico's never going to pay for this. Why would they? And his answer is something like, I think, in any other business we would describe as extortion. He's saying that on day one, these are his words, on day one, he would tell Mexico, come across with $5 or $10 billion for the wall right away, or we're going to cut off the remittances that Mexicans in the country, in the United States illegally, are sending back to their families in Mexico. That's billions and billions of dollars a year, and some economists or experts in that field say that it would actually cripple the Mexican economy. But it is an answer to the question, although it isn't perhaps one that people were expecting when he's talked before about maybe having a toll gate on that wall if he were to build it. But it's also only one of a couple of things that he's been coming out with to give more detail to his thinking and to mollify some of his critics. Another one from the same interview that Woodward did for the Washington Post was Trump's promise to come up with a list in the next 10 days or a couple of weeks of the people that he would consider for the Supreme Court. A list that would be put together not by himself exclusively, but by groups such as the Conservative Heritage Foundation and other conservatives. And he has promised that he will pick from that list. What he's doing there is clearly trying to persuade those who doubt that he has conservative bona fides, that he really is a conservative Republican, and you can count on him to appoint conservative judges to the court. So take it all together, Heather, and I think you have to recognize that Trump is seeing a need for him to be more explicit about what his plans are as president and to come across with details that are at least to some degree thought out in some direction.
So there may be as well a need to show that women, in fact, have not all abandoned him. We see Trump campaigning ahead of today in Wisconsin, and he brings out someone who we see and hear from very rarely, and that's his wife, Melania. Here's a little bit of tape from her comments yesterday.
I'm very proud of him. He's a hard worker, he's kind, he has a great heart. He's tough, he's smart. He's a great communicator, he's a great negotiator. He's telling the truth. He's a great leader.
So there you go, extolling the praises of her husband. At the same time, Sarah Palin, who supported Donald Trump, comes out and speaks in his behalf, although it was a little bit hard to understand. Gibberish, some people called it. Here's some of that.
He isn't bragging about his ability, though doggone it, he's got the ability. He's not bragging about his own ability to make America great again. He talks about putting government back in the hands of the people, we the people, and then we of our own initiative.
There we go. We might as well cut it off because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense the longer it goes. But what is the purpose of trotting these two out at this particular moment, Keith?
Yeah, and Palin apparently left that audience absolutely flat. But you're right. He is trying to show that there is some female support for him because of the week that he had last week. He made comments about abortion. There was the whole controversy about tweeting or retweeting the photo of Ted Cruz's wife next to one of his own, which was unflattering to her. These are problems that were identified at the beginning of the campaign by Megyn Kelly when she pointed out that he had so many things on the record that were disparaging and insulting about women that it would be easy for Democrats to run against him as somebody who was part of their war on women. That did not create much trouble until people started focusing on something besides just the Republican race, where he was doing very well in the polls month after month after month. What they weren't looking at were general election polls, where he has consistently done much poorly. He says that he has always been on top of the polls and able to beat Hillary Clinton. Not true. Very, very few polls show him being able to beat Hillary Clinton, and lately he's dropped into a double-digit deficit behind her. So he needs to do something, but the fact is, he really doesn't have a lot of women surrogates who can stand up on a stage and speak to him. So he brings out his wife, he brings out Sarah Palin, who endorsed him a few months ago to do that. Whether it has any impact, whether it's too little or too late or both, I think that's really the big question.
So there are lots of questions about whether or not he has begun to lose ground, and we'll find out in Wisconsin. But I think there's a question out there that's even more interesting, and I've been reading it in a number of analysis pieces, and I'm sure you have been as well. And let me just quote from one that I read in the Huffington Post. Donald Trump does not want to be president. In fact, he never wanted to be president. His entire campaign has been a long con and a ruse to strengthen his brand and feed his ego. So all of these incredibly and increasingly nonsensical statements and more, vitriolic, more negative comments, has it all been part of a great exit strategy to a joke, Keith? Is there anything plausible in that?
Well, I think it's entirely plausible. People didn't take his candidacy seriously at the beginning of the campaign because they thought, well, who would? He can't be serious himself. So the idea has been at least in the backs of people's minds for a long time. But when you start to think about what's happening right now, he's being tested on the campaign trail. He's coming face to face with some of the realities of being president. And it may not look as attractive to him as it appeared when it was just a notional idea. If you consider what his own life has been like, he has a nicer plane than the president. He, in his own estimation, would say he has a nicer house than the president. He gets to meet a lot of interesting people. He has the complete freedom to say and do whatever he wants. And boy, does he ever enjoy that to the max. He knows for sure that none of those things are going to continue if he becomes president. Being president, I've often said, who would want that job? Who would want such a difficult job where in many people's estimation, you could only fail? Certainly not someone who prides himself on winning.
It's going to be an interesting thing to follow. I'll tell you who would like the job. Hillary Clinton would like the job. Bernie Sanders seems to like the job. So let's quickly flip to the Democrats. We've heard them debate over debates in the state of New York. We've heard them go very, very strongly over donations to her campaign from the fossil fuel industry. That came up in the campaign just the other day. Some sort of surreptitious video shot of Hillary Clinton. Let's play that for just a second.
I am so sick. I am so sick of the Sanders campaign lying about me. I'm sick of it.
So finger going. She says he's overstating how much money comes from that industry. The frustration boiling over. What does that indicate, Keith, on this day of Wisconsin voting?
I think it indicates that she feels that she really is dented by that criticism, that the secrecy about the speeches she gives on Wall Street, the sources of the funding for her campaign, just juxtaposed against what Bernie Sanders is always reminding people on the campaign, which is that his campaign is very, very well financed, but it's very well financed by people making small donations of an average of $27. I think that really does, I think you'd have to say that really has had an impact on her. And this race is not at all the race that she had expected that it would be. It still doesn't look like Bernie Sanders has the numbers to get to the nomination, but he's making it a lot tougher for her, a lot longer for her than she wanted. It's very, very tiring, and that may also have been one of the factors you saw in play there in that little bit of clip. It kind of just enough already. This has been going on and on and on. I'm fed up with it.
Okay.
But I think it does reflect that there is a lot more pressure on her in this race than she ever imagined.
Are you writing on Wisconsin for online for tomorrow?
I plan to.
All right, so CBCNews.ca. Read some of Keith's analysis online, and of course, we'll see you next week for another primary primer. Thank you, Keith.
Thanks for saying that.